we're all settled in, so we can kick it off. Hi guys, welcome to Branding 101. You may be wondering, who are you? Who are these random two girls standing in front of you? I think most of you guys actually know us, but if you don't, my name is Grace. I work at the Innovation Boost, so I'm doing a lot of marketing and comms here, so I've had the pleasure of making a couple of brands within IBZ, and I'm here with...
I'm Nazifa. I also work under marketing. I'm also graphic designing and the website.
Alrighty, and we have an exciting day planned. It's super simple. We're going to talk about what exactly is a brand, just kind of get ourselves all on the same page. Then we're going to teach you step by step, very informative, on how to build a brand. And don't hate us, we might do a quiz, just for giggles. It's nothing serious, it's nothing intense, it's just to see if you guys are retaining your information. But if you didn't retain anything, I really don't care that much, so it's fine, just do whatever you want. Without further ado, let's kick it off. What is a brand? And we found a quote that we think represents this the best, which is by Lisa Gangsky. It's called, "A brand is a voice and a product is a souvenir." And you may be wondering, what does that even mean? Basically saying that your product is your souvenir in the sense that it can be replicated, it can exist in multiple places, but your brand is your voice, and that's a very unique thing about your company. Here's an example. So this is Samsung's website. The first thing you see when you hit samsung.ca, and this is Apple's. The first thing you see when you open their website. They're the same exact souvenir, so we both sell tech goods, but they're completely different brand voices. So can anybody tell me, what brand voice do you see or feel when looking at these two brands? It's no wrong answer. Like any sort of keywords that kind of stand out to you as a user. Bold. Which one? Do you have both? Apple, okay. Anybody else? What about Samsung? Any thoughts? Lots of cameras, okay. That's valid, that's valid.
Mysterious.
Mysterious? For Apple, okay. You only care about Apple, I respect that. But basically, Nazifa and I, we deduced that Samsung comes off as more traditional, it's classic, it's basic, we're very familiar, we know it's very safe. Meanwhile, Apple, we gave off a vibe that they know something that, modern, cool, innovative, and even though they sell the same exact product, depending on what type of vibe you give off with your brand, that'll educate users on whether or not to engage with your brand. So what this workshop will teach you is how you're going to develop your unique and compelling brand voice. And how we do this? By dissecting every step of a fake brand that is even built. So welcome to Bonnie Lab. I think the exposure is really high, so you guys can't really see our logo, but we're basically a design agency that makes brands for startups. We handle all the creative junk so that startups can do all the important stuff. And we're going to teach you guys how we made this brand from start to finish. This is completely fake, by the way. It is not real. Do not contact us about Bonnie Lab. It does not exist. Yeah, there is non-existent brand here. Step one, you guys are probably going to think this is really dumb, but it is think of a name. I know that sounds really dumb because most of you guys probably have a name in mind. But if you don't, here's some tips. Step one is ask yourself some questions and start with what you know. So some guiding questions you have is, what is your company? What services do you offer? You can also think about what vibe and energy you want to portray. And also, what do you personally enjoy as a person? It's very random. So for the Bonnie Lab, we create brands. We are optimistic, we're fun, we enjoy having fun with our work. And as dumb as it sounds, we love cute things. We love seeing cute things, we love making cute things, so that's basically the Bonnie Lab. And once you've answered those questions, you have a couple of options at your disposal. You can use things like ChatGPT. So basically, you just be like, hey, I have all these lists, make a name for this company. Or you can go the more traditional route of thinking, brainstorming, and Googling results. For the Bonnie Lab, we went down the more traditional route because I think ChatGPT is pretty self-explanatory. So a little bit about the creative process. You knew from the start you wanted to use the word lab. I think at IBZ, we're very tech focused. We thought it was kind of funny to use the word lab. And then we ended up searching a bunch of words like design agency, creative agency, synonyms for that word, synonyms for another word. And then we decided, let's go back to cute, we like cute things. So we searched up synonyms for cute words, and then we saw the word Bonnie, and we were like, oh, that's a cute word. And then we realized Bonnie meant beautiful or attractive, which is perfect because we want to make beautiful and attractive words. Hence, the Bonnie Lab. And you're probably thinking, this is so dumb. Like literally, I hate this workshop. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's so obvious, but you're totally right. Like the naming process is so dumb. It's so silly. Literally, it's the most ridiculous thing you're ever gonna do. But I want to show you guys how much more ridiculous it gets by talking about other companies and how they came up with their names. So it's going to be a little activity. I want you guys to guess how these companies come up with their names here. How did Apple come up with their name? I know you're dressed as Steve Jobs today, sir. Do you mind telling us your opinion? Okay, he's eating an apple. All right. Anybody else have a guess? There's technically a wrong answer, but just for the sake of getting your attention, no wrong answers. Drop whatever. Okay. Well, as dumb as it sounds, it's because he apparently liked apples. That was literally, he was like, my first company, I like apples, so I'm going to name it Apple. And it was as simple as that. Tesla. Anybody have an idea why Tesla is named Tesla? Jeez, that's really messed up. You're right. But basically, this person apparently was an inventor, made a lot of impactful innovations within the industries that we all use today, like our remote controls, I think phones as well. So Tesla named it after this individual. And last but not least, Google. Does anybody know what Google started off as? Oh, do you know? Wait. Yeah, that's true. Okay, fine, you can go. Yeah. So Google is actually named after, I'm not sure if it's this, but Google. It's basically some sort of mathematical thing. I hate math, but it's something like 100 zeros after 100 or 1 or something like that. Don't quote me. But they really like the word, and they were like, but Google sounds kind of weird. So then they played around with it and landed on Google. So as you guys can see, it's very random, and it could take time, it could take iteration, so probably won't get it right on the first try. But that's totally cool. And also find comfort in the fact that there's no right answer. There's literally no such thing as a right answer in branding. Everything can be wrong, but it's just a matter of doing what feels the best. Thank you for that amazing ASMR. But yeah, that's basically a bit about naming your brand. But one thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is just try to make a unique name, especially if you're building a company. Make sure it's unique so that you don't get sued. You don't like getting sued. So just make sure you do a name search, or I think there are business searches as well. So just make sure whatever you have is unique to you. Any questions so far? I hate awkward silences. So oh, thank you so much. That was very, very in my face. So step 2 is pick your typeface. In case there's people that don't know what a typeface is, it is the little letters on the screen. I know this is also going to sound kind of dumb, but bear with me, it actually matters. So typefaces and fonts actually provoke reactions, opinions, and also emotions from their users. So depending on what you use, your user will naturally think a certain opinion about your brand. And that's going to impact how people engage with your product or service if they even choose to engage with you at all. So these are the 2 fonts I'm going to teach you. I feel like this is going to sound so dumb, guys, but again, bear with me. There's Serif fonts, and there's, I don't know if you guys say sans or sans. Sans? Yeah, I've been saying sans in my practices. I just feel like sans kind of sounds fancy. I sound like I'm cooler than I am. But yeah, there's the 2 fonts here. The difference is obviously the little ticks. So Serif fonts have those little ticks at the end. These guys are little movements. And they basically communicate different meanings. Serif fonts are more traditional. It shows elegance, sophistication, and also it's very respectable, as if you've been in the industry for a really long time. On the flip side, the other side is modern, innovative, trendy. It's a little bit, there is trust, but it comes off a bit more intimidating compared to the latter. And also, there are some accessibility and utility tips you should know. This font is a little less accessible compared to this side because of the little ticks. So if you make it really, really small, people can't read it as easily as this side over here. And then also, utility-wise, generally speaking, when you're building like a website or an app, this font is a little bit more accessible, so that's another thing to consider when picking your own. So I don't know if you guys recognize these brands, but these are some luxury, high-end fashion brands. And I don't know if anybody keeps up with this, but in the recent years, they've all swapped over to a sans serif font. Does anybody have a guess as to why they did that? So you have no wrong answers. These are all speculations.
It's more easy for dyslexia to go with that center.
Do you have an idea? Okay. So it's actually exactly the 2 points that you guys addressed. Yes, it is more accessible with the rise of like the digital age. We kind of need more sans serif fonts in the industry, but also, yes, they want to attract the younger audience. So they thought, since the younger generation kind of grew up with this type of typeface, we want to go with that route and be more trendy with the kids. Fun fact though, real fashion lovers hate the rebrands that they're all doing, thinking that it loses the sophistication and elegance that the brands have built over the years. So although you may think it's right in one lens, it's also really important to talk to your audiences, get their opinion, make sure what you're doing actually makes sense to one image. So how do you pick your typeface? Obviously, consider all the tips that I just shared, but a more practical tool for you to use is Google Fonts. So Google Fonts is really, really easy to use. Basically, when you log on, this giant screen will pop up, and what you can do is just go to like the type something section and type in your company name, and you can literally scroll through and just see what speaks to you the best. You can also filter based off of font type, but the whole goal is just to find what works for you. And for the Bonnie Lab, after scrolling for quite a bit, actually I didn't scroll at all because I ended up picking this one, but it is Wix. I thought this one fit it really well for two reasons. It's a sans serif font, so again, we want to come off as innovative, trendy, because we are building other people's brands, so we want to look like we're ahead of the game. But also, we felt that the shape of this sans serif font was very round, circular, more wide in shape. Therefore, we thought that it was more approachable, friendly, fun, and also this is really cute. That is the whole premise of the Bonnie Lab. So that's kind of how we landed on this one. Any questions? Any question?
Oh, I do have something to add, and that is that so like I think Google Fonts is good because it's open source, so you can like use them freely for your brand and not be worried about like copyright and like only whoever created the font. But there are like websites that if you literally just Google like free font downloads, that will like for example typeface.com, where you can download like these special fonts, but you might have to be worried about commercializing and stuff after. Because that does go into like the issue of like copyright and like this is someone's work, like someone created this font, so you don't want to be using it for brand.
Yeah, Google Font is very easy to use and also very accessible, so it's a good starting point for getting people to worship it. But I'm going to pass it to Zika to talk about the next share.
I'm the and I'm going to be starting with picking a color for your brand. So just like fonts and typefaces, colors also evoke reactions and emotions. So just to kind of start off as an exercise, what emotions we get when we look at this color?
Anger, excitement.
Yes. Anyone else? So you guys are basically, this is what I also thought, like anger, alert, emergency, bold. Let's try the opposite. What do you think of when you look at blue?
Not this one per se.
Yeah.
But maybe calming.
Yeah. Sky. Kind of on the same note, trust, corporate, calm. I don't know if you noticed, but like a lot of big corporations like banks and like Facebook, they use blue to kind of do the same thing where like they want you to trust them, and it's really funny because like Facebook is like taking your data and stuff, but it's like this is how you market. You know, this is your brand. This is how you want to label yourself. So it's often used in like corporate lenses. But yeah, it's supposed to evoke like calm and trust. So I kind of can't really see it because of the brightness, but these are graphics that show a lot of the logos that a lot of the companies will use and kind of associated words that like have to do with the color. So you can kind of refer to this after when you look through the slides. But this is not like a rule for sure, but these are like good places to start if you have an idea of where your brand like, wants to be placed. So if you want to go for more bold, you would choose like reds and brighter colors. And maybe like lighter colors or like green is really popular for like environmental focused things or health. So that's kind of like what you want to associate with your voice. So if we go back to our, but also I did mention that you should try to stick to 1 to 3 colors because first of all, it's hard to match so many colors with each other. Usually they end up clashing after 3. It becomes like Google where you're a rainbow. But also less is more. So you want to keep it simple because you also want to take it seriously. And this is kind of like for your own good. So if we go back to the bonding lab, you can't really see this, but this is a pink, and this is a light purple. And we chose these colors because they are like pastel, they're light and cute, and then back to like what we wanted. But then on top of that, we also included black and white, which you should always include because we'll need it for future uses. So outside of black and white, it's this purple and pink that's for bonding labs. Now I'm going to go into a little more of a technical use of color.
For choosing the colors, we talk about the emotional aspect, but sometimes we see like most of beauty and healthcare products go with color purple. Is it like more accepted to go with like the known color in each industry, or going based on like the emotion side of the color?
It's honestly up to you. There's a lot of brands that might actually, they want to maybe stand out from the rest. So maybe they'll, if you're an environmental company and you don't want to use green because every other environmental company is using green, then you might want to use a different color to stand out, or a different shade, or a not commonly used shade. So kind of on that same aspect, I think like a lot of companies have kind of switched over to like these like individual colors.
I was gonna say, like, I think you'll notice in this whole presentation, everything is so trivial. There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer, really. So when in doubt, if you feel like yeah, I need some sort of like objective, and when you're objective answer, I'd say talk to customers, like literally show them some samples and have them test. You don't tell them anything, you say like, which one seems better to you. I think I literally did that to some of my colleagues today about how there's another brand that we're building right now. And I literally just went up to them and said, which color do you think makes sense? And then oftentimes I get really honest.
Sometimes like colors on their own aren't like the best, but maybe you want to try different combinations of colors. And even with the bonding lab, like Grace and I, we like went back and forth on like different combinations that we like. So we just settled on it based on like, I think it's always good to just do variations and choose from that. And also obviously get like so kind of always hearing so the next thing that I want to talk about is the difference between RGB and CYMK, which I'm sure a lot of you know, but I'm just going to review for anyone who doesn't. So this is kind of like the difference. The way you should know it is CYMK. You probably recognize it from like buying ink for your printer. That's because it's used in printing. And so they stand for C is cyan, M is magenta, Y is yellow, and K is key, which stands for black. And I kind of have like this image that shows how like printing works. And it's basically these colors like being stamped on this paper, and once they overlap, they create a color. So when you zoom out, you see like this combination of dots and stamps actually make this green. And then on the other hand, RGB is different because you can see kind of the close-up where it uses red, green, and blue to like and different brightnesses of these like red dots, which from far away look like purple, pink, red, and like, it's just like from far away it looks like these colors. And I guess like the main thing to take away from it is there is light being shined behind this, whereas this is like on your piece of paper. And so what ends up happening is a lot of colors that look different because on your screen they'll look brighter, and then when you print it, it's like dull. And so you want to try to choose colors that look consistent to it, because you don't want to have like a really bright blue and also like a navy blue later, you know. So you want to try to choose colors that like are bright maybe throughout. And so the example I used was actually RGB colors. So these are like the colors you'll see around the space sometimes. So they all have like specific numbers, which I kind of want to go through. So the first one is CMYK, and it kind of has like a number beside it. And that kind of tells us like how much ink goes into it to make this color. So for black, it's obviously just key, so just black. And the other colors have like color descriptions, but then RGB and hex are like for screens. So kind of like how would you apply that? Yeah. RGB and hex are the same thing. They just use different scales. So hex uses hex code, which is I don't want to go into, but it's like if you use like it's another numbering system like binary. So it's just like it uses like it goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then A B C D E F G. Yeah.
Basically, RGB is not readable by the computer, so each of those numbers for RGB will be translated to two of those numbers in the hex, and then those numbers are based on zeros and ones, and that computer can different that in order to give them points.
But yeah, it's just another like language to communicate with your computer which color you want. But kind of, you don't really need to understand what the numbers mean. You just need to know that this is like the naming convention for your color. So where you would apply it is, for example, so this is like the color choosing for Adobe. And here you can see like RGB. You can plug in the numbers to get your exact color here. And then there's also CMYK, where you can plug in, these are percentages out of 100. So 100 being like the most. So you would just plug in those numbers for CMYK. And then here's the section for hex code, which you will also see in Canva. So, and this is more accessible, because I know Adobe is expensive. But this is where you would put in your hex code. So when choosing your colors, try to like record which hex code you use and use it throughout to stay consistent with your brand. You don't want to have different blues and different purples and make it different throughout the brand. So one way to remember when to use which is RG. If it goes on a screen, make it red, blue, green, and if you'll print it someday, choose CMYK. It's a poem. And so like you want to just make sure you use this one for when you're printing. Another thing I want to go through was describing color. So let's say you're working with a partner on your company and you're trying to decide on these colors. It's hard to describe how to move the color to the way you want it. And we realized that was an issue when we've worked with clients ourselves. So kind of just as a general rule, what type of words you should be using and what they mean. Here, I'm talking about saturation. So if you want less saturation, less color, you want to say to make the color more muted. Here, if you want to make it brighter, more saturated, use brighter, more colorful, or more saturated. It seems so dumb, I know, but you would be surprised.
For context, guys, we're working with a together, and I keep saying we call those pastels. We look at them in pastels, but they just get muted, and we were like doing this for almost communication. So this communication is major. Like it can take you so long to set on something just because of how it's like.
And also, they were saying like neon is not a color. It's like a sign.
Yeah, yeah. They said neon. We showed like bright yellows.
Yeah,
like neon. And we were
they're
like
even brighter. And
yeah.
like, at this point, you just want a flashlight. Like we don't even know. So and then same thing. So if you want lighter, more pastel colors, you're adding white to the color instead of previously you're taking color out or in. Here you're adding white to the color. It makes it a lighter tint. It makes it more pastel. And then here, when you're making a darker shade, you're adding black. Again, very stupid. Last one. There's warm colors and cool colors. Obviously, the objectively like warm ones are like fire colors, and then there's cool colors that are like blue and watery. But if you want to change one to the other, you go like this direction on the wheel. So for orange, it becomes more pink, and then here like green becomes more blue, and then the other way around. But you can refer to this later on when you have this presentation if you're having difficulty. Now, lastly, I want to go through accessibility and how you want to make sure that you have good colors for the best number of audience. So the best way you can make sure to kind of like please every audience member is to have really good contrast between your colors. So one thing you need to account for is color blindness. There's a lot of different types of color blindness. There's also red and green, which is probably the most popular one. To kind of tackle that, you use colors that are good contrast. So like here, even on the screen, you can't tell like this bottom line of anything because these are examples of bad contrast. Whereas these ones, they somehow still survive on the screen because they're like good contrast between the two colors. So, funnily enough, this is like Ryerson colors, so they clearly know what they're doing. And then this is an example of the color blindness test. So like if you can't read what this number is, you probably color blind. But yeah, I'm sorry you found that out here. Yeah. And here's a tip for figuring out if your colors are good or not. If you turn your image or your colors grayscale and you see whether or not grayscale they're good contrast. So contrast meaning like can you tell the difference between the two areas of these colors? Then you'll know if it's good. So here it's like you can kind of see it. Where this is lighter gray, this is a darker gray, so this is a pretty good contrast. The best contrast is black and white. So for our Bonnie Lab, we have an example here where it's black and white over the pink color we have, black and white over the purple color we have, and then the pink and purple on top of each other. And we turned it out grayscale to show like whether or not it's good contrast. This side, obviously not good contrast. You cannot see these dots. But here you can still see the black on this, and you can still see the black on this. So we're just saying like we won't use these combinations of colors in our brand. We will never use the pink on top of the purple or purple and white. So it's a good thing to keep in mind for accessibility. Any questions?
Yep. We're choosing a color for the brand itself and the logo that is like very bright. Obviously, we can go with that same color palette for let's say our website, or when it comes on like your application or website is like on that side. How should we tackle that? Are we supposed to make it more pastel, or like the same things like reducing the saturation, or like creating that whole different like color palette for our online presence?
It should be the same throughout. So you should choose colors and really like go through as many combinations as possible that will work in all scenarios. Like IDZ, for example, we're trying to use the same colors in our printing and our website and our like everything we do, so that you know that it's IDZ, the brand, all throughout. So if you use like a different color palette for your website, people might not like associate it with things that they want to see in person on the presentation or something like that. So you want to stay consistent, and if you see that you're struggling to keep that color on your website, then maybe you should choose a different color.
Yeah. One thing also, okay. I was just gonna say, you're gonna notice this again as a common thread. Consistency in branding is really important. So we often see a lot of founders like change fonts and they're like, I'm gonna use this font for my logo, but I'm gonna completely change the font for like everything else. I'm gonna change the font for this one. And they try having like a collection of children of fonts that they're just gonna interchange depending on what platform they use. Please don't do that. Like just pick one font. You can probably use a different font for your logo. It's very good stylistic and kind of complex shortly. But generally speaking, like things should always be consistent. Colors, fonts, every single element of it. And that's what really leads into the good. Since you've been in the are actually allowed like, for a good brand.
Yeah, I think it's like one to three less. Yeah, because and of course within that you can do like gradients if that's what the brand wants. So when you're doing gradients, you're introducing all these colors in between two colors. But generally, you want to stick to one to three, not including black and white. So red, blue, green, and then maybe black and white. It's the most professional, I would say. And the older brands have these more colors, then they simplify it less because they realize minimalism is a thing. I think Anna wanted to add something.
Actually, I got my answer.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, we're gonna keep going. Now we're gonna move on to creating your logo. Now this is a very there's no rules on this. It just like your name, it's kind of like a nonsensical process. You have to make up things. You have to be creative. You have to find a play on words or something with your company. So this is not a rule, but this is kind of just a way that we got to our logo. So you have to apply your understanding of what you have so far. So we chose a typeface, we chose a voice, we chose colors. So now we're going to combine all of those things for our logo. So just as an example, the Bonnie Lab, we wanted to stick to being a design lab, where we want to be approachable and friendly. We also realized that Bonnie kind of sounds like bunny, so maybe something there. And then we want to go a minimalist and a round, friendly font kind of vibe, right? So just to show our design process, we went through a lot of things. So we wanted to see if we can play with the font that we showed you earlier, the Wix font. And then we saw that, okay, let's make a bunny. But a lot of people said this bunny kind of looks like the Playboy. So we were maybe we shouldn't stick to that. We also, just to go back, explored different ways to stack the words. If you notice here, some of here the is thinner, this part is thicker. We also noticed when we made an I, it kind of looks like the O. So we're okay, let's replace the O with the body, So it's just a lot of playing around with for sure. But it's a good thing to ask around because then we want to avoid being associated with
Actually, fun fact, we didn't ask around, but people looked over her shoulder.
Yeah,
people looked over her shoulder and they were like, "Is that the plan?" And then we realized we hit the
you were like, "Yeah, we need to change it right
so
now."
seek feedback because if we didn't, we would have been so embarrassed.
So, yeah, exactly. So instead, we went with this type of silhouette, which is like, it's kind of like if you went like this, but it's also like a bunny still. So it's still playing on the bunny Bonnie lab. And then we still replaced it with the O, kind of like the version we showed you earlier. Obviously, this is not the best contrast. So here, if you want to try to do black and white, if you're ever in modern life. But so here we have like our logo, which is like an icon version, and then here we have our like full horizontal logo. So you want to make sure to make like different types of logos because you will be using them in different instances. So as a rule of thumb, I would say you should make about 6 or more different kinds, and this is including color and format. So format-wise, you should try to have just an icon version. So whether that be like just a picture or letters, but a very small icon, and then another one that is like a horizontal logo, and a square icon word logo is like an optional. I'll show you later what that means, but these two should be like the priority. So for us, this is our horizontal logo and this is our icon logo. And then within these formats, we want to have different color combinations. So the fully colored version, so you might have more than one color. Ours only has this one color, so that's fine. And then you want to have a black version and a white version. And these should be transparent PNGs so that other people, when you send them your logo, they can use it on their own form. And the same thing for your icon logo. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here are some other examples. So for TMU, for example, Toronto Metropolitan University, a very, very long word. And it's hard to see from when you make it really tiny. So that's why TMU made a smaller version. This is their icon version. And then on their website, you'll see they have a black version, a white version, and then a fully colored version. Same thing, they have a black and white version of this and a fully colored version. And then here we have dominoes. And this is what I mean by like a horizontal logo. And then here is what I mean by like a square stack logo. So this is like square friendly, whereas like when you put it here, it's like a rectangle. And then this is their icon. So like, why do you need so many, right? And so here are some examples of where you would be using your logos. So here I have like my tabs when they're really tiny, and I have a bunch of tabs on my Chrome. This is what you're left with your website, let's say. So these are the logos. This is the icon logo that you would be using. So you want to have one that's recognizable, even when it's this small. So if it was Toronto Metropolitan University, you probably wouldn't be able to see it. So like, but our Bonnie Lab with the logo, you could see it. And here we have our master's in engineering tote. So at the end, we ended up printing just a black on tote on the canvas, and it's only one color. So we would want to have one color version so that, for example, for printing a tote, each color was expensive. So if we wanted to have just a one color version of our logo, we save money by printing so many. And then here's an example of where partners that sent their logos to us at IBC, they would have to send us a black or white version so that we could put it on our website so that it's styled with our website. So you might not be needing the black and white logo, but other people might reach out to them to be using it. So you want to have the black and white so that it fits their or like everyone's. Yeah, those are just some examples. Obviously, there's so many more, and it depends on what your brand does. But yeah, this is a start. I also want to go through raster versus vector images, and this is very important because when you make your logo, if it is a pixelated raster version, raster is a new word, it just means pixelated. It will be pixelated with blow it up. So an example is if you see the permanent desk signs, not to call them out, but a lot of these companies had only a raster version of their logo. So when I made it that big, they probably never needed it that big. But when I need to make it for their permanent desk signs, a lot of them, if you look closely, are very, very pixelated. We kind of like dodged a bullet because they're a little far up and you can't really see, and a lot of people wear glasses. But honestly, you should make it a vector image or like a very large PNG file so that it can be blown up as big as possible and it wouldn't be pixelated around the edges. So if you ever have time, go ahead and look. Zoom in to see the pixel. But as a rule of thumb, kind of what goes on behind here is like tiny pixels make up this image, whereas here mathematical functions make up this image. So some file types that are used here is like if you use Adobe Illustrator, or there are some like free vector softwares that we attach in this presentation at the end. So when you make your logo, I suggest using those and exporting them as SVG or very large PNG files.
Can I rasterize?
Yeah.
Something in my head that makes
you're making it into pixels.
Is there a way that I can make it vector? No.
So, but if you use Adobe Illustrator, if you guys are familiar with it, there is this option to make image trace. If you've ever used it, that essentially kind of traces your pixels to make a mathematical function out of that raster file. So often you'll see like if you do like image trace, you can manipulate it later on. So manipulating the functions that create it. It's a little complicated, but we did attach like kind of like software you can use to make it this way. But I think for the long run, you should make your logo a vector file so that later you can manipulate it without it being. I also attached kind of like how to differentiate between file types. So JPEG is what people tend to give us. JPEG is not good because it's so raster. It's also a very small file, but it's good for websites because you don't need big files for websites, especially because you want them to load quickly on your website as you like scroll through them. So that's why JPEGs are good for your websites. PNG is good because you can export them as large files and use them on your graphics when you print them, and they won't be like rasterized too much. And then SVG is like a vector file, which you can manipulate like the curves and like manipulate the mathematical functions. So, last step. I'm going to pass it back to Grace.
Any questions in the meantime? Because I know that was kind of like a crazy section.
Actually, yeah, there was a
Yeah, what about it? Yeah, any questions so far? Are we really psyched out? Okay, this one's going to be super easy, so we're ready to get a little bit bored again. But basically, we're going to talk about making your graphic assets, starting with a slide deck, because that's commonly what founders are using at the moment for pitch decks. This is going to be very, very fundamental. How do you make a nice, crisp deck? So step one, kind of like we did earlier for the logo, just list all the basics of what you have about your brand. So for the body lab, we got our colors, our font/typeface, our logo, and then also, if you can, try to identify some key design points. So for example, you guys saw how our logo is really circular and curved. That's what we're going to be leveraging as our main design points. If you have something in your brand that you can kind of pinpoint, like, yeah, this is a nice little pattern that I'm seeing. Look for it, jot it down, whether it's in a document or just in your head. And step two, think about what type of slides you want/need. This is very, very important. I've seen a lot of startups that surprisingly don't do this. But when you make a deck, you want to identify what type of content you're going to be putting in that deck so you can make appropriate slides for it. So for example, I'm going to just use the IBT deck as an example. You'll need a title slide. Like, hey, this is the design of the title slide. It'll guide you that this is the start and the end of my presentation. You want something to divide your content as well. So we use section slide headers. And then a body text slide, breaking up the information, showing users that this is the body text. And then this is Wes's face. Sorry, Wes, your face is on here. This guy took the photo actually. But you might want something where you can show a chart or like an image in combination with text that describes what you're talking about. And make sure you identify those and your brand basics, and then have fun applying everything. So I'm going to give you guys some tips and best practices on how you can make a clean deck, even if you don't have a lot of graphic design skills. So just some tools that you can reference. Pinterest. Okay, Pinterest is so underrated. If you guys don't have an account, not sponsored, make an account. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much inspo on there. Obviously, don't rip off the designs. Look at it and see how they organize their decks, and you can get a lot of good ideas on how you can elevate your ones. Google Slides, Microsoft PowerPoint, Canva, they all have free templates you can use, which is great. But obviously, when you're building your own brand, you want something a little bit more unique. So make it as a point of inspiration, and then try to just drop something scratch on your own. And then these are things to keep in mind if you really just know nothing about graphic design. You're like, Grace, like I know nothing and I don't know anybody that does graphic design. What do I do? Keep things simple and stay consistent. If you guys look at Apple's deck, for example, it's literally empty and they just put text on it, but it looks really good because they keep things consistent. Consistency is really key. Your design can also be as simple as colored blocks or lines. So if you guys even looked at the IPT deck, all we really do is have a little logo at the corner and then our logo stacked a bunch of times. That's all it is. So it can be really, really simple, and it also can just be absolutely nothing. Take advantage of white space. You don't need to fill up the screen from here to here. I see a lot of people doing that, thinking it makes you look really cool. It makes you look a little bit dated. So maybe keep things a little bit more naked on the screen. And then using that slide hierarchy that I just talked about. So all these slides, something that identifies your users visually, like, hey, yeah, we're moving through a story here. Make sure you identify certain slides and designs that are specific to them and keep that consistent when you're doing your presentations. Don't use like a title slide as like a body text slide and have like all these nitty-gritty details. That'll kind of psych up while they're listening to your conversation. And then, last but not least, have a typography hierarchy. So those fonts that we identify, you want, again, consistency. So my title slide or my title text here is going to generally be the same throughout the entire deck. My body text will also be the same throughout the entire deck. If you just follow these basic rules, even if you have nothing on your deck, it'll look really professional and it'll also look really clean and crisp. So even if you know nothing, just follow these things and you'll have a really, really solid. I'm gonna let Nazifa kind of talk about the design process.
So yeah, this is a projector, but you can't really see. But there's like a little like bunny here with a circle, and then there's a circle here, and a circle here. Unicorn. Can we?
So is that the lights?
Yeah, zoom into the. It's too romantic. I still use that, but
Maybe we should have done earlier.
like, yeah. Yeah, it's almost done, but yeah, we follow kind of like the same hierarchy that Grace kind of outlined just now. So we have a title page, a section header. I call it something else. This is like a image with text and heading, and then this is just text and heading. And kind of like the elements that we decide to use for Drawing Lab is like the circular kind of theme. We also remembered contrast, so it was always black on white and white on black. It was never like the purple on purple, like we showed, because it was bad contrast. And accessibility-wise, we want to make sure people can read the stuff on its slides. Then yeah, it's a lot of that, and then we also kept our logo in the corner. It was different based on which slide it was, but similar to IBC, that was kind of a brand element that we wanted to keep consistent. And then generally, like for example, this heading is the same as this heading, this text size is the same as this text size, stuff like that. You don't notice it when you're going through the slide, but you will feel it because it's like, wow, it's like this is clean, this is consistent. It's something that doesn't need to be spelled out, but you'll notice it. But yeah, that's kind of generally what the brand is. There's a lot of circles. Like yeah, any questions?
How to know like when to use like the title or the logo for this or that?
I think it depends on, I'd say, the story you're trying to tell. So if it's like a pitch deck really, hey, this is a company, then you could really start off with a simple logo on the screen. Start the page. But for example, for our sake of the workshop, we just put the logo in the corner and the title of our session. So it depends on the usage. That's why we say like identify your story and then identify what type of slides to support that story. Because that'll make your process a lot easier instead of like putting it on the deck and kind of
I also wanted to like mention how like our different logos. This one, it spells out the name of our company, and whereas this one is just so you don't want to be using this where you want to be marketing your name. So, you don't want to be using this when you want to be marketing your name. You want people to know the name of your company. Don't use the icon. Don't just use something that is difficult to like Google. You can't be like, oh, what's a bunny? So you want to make sure your name is visible. If it's something where you're marketing, you're working with partners, you want it on their website, use this.
Yeah. I guess like a way to think about it is if you're writing a paper, almost like say I'm writing a marketing copy for IBC, I'm not going to kick it off by being like, apply to IBC's XYZ. I would say like, apply to Innovation Boost Zones XYZ, and then afterwards I'll start using IBC. So it's kind of the same content. You'll use a long logo first in all situations, and then once people are familiar with that, then you can So always keep it off of your book. You want to get any questions? The last little chunk was basically just tools and resources. So we listed free resources and then also paid resources depending on what you need. It's also for like video editing, logo making, graphic design. So yeah, most of the ones that are free for access. Yeah, we listed quite a few.